Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 248. Thank you for joining us. Today, my wife Maggie takes my place in joining Bonnie to welcome back Katie Bogner and Sheri Van Vranken to the Kolbecast. In episode 184, Katie and Sheri joined us to talk about Advent and their book, All About Advent and Christmas. Today, we've shifted to Lent and their new book, All About Lent and Holy Week. In addition to exploring the new book, the group discusses Lenten practices and traditions, feast days in Lent, and practices for fully entering into Holy Week. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and chief homeschooling officer for Kolbe Academy.
Alas, Stephen is absent from the Kolbecast ensemble today. I am happy, however, to report that his wife, Maggie, who serves as Kolbe Academy's curriculum director, is filling in for him as co-host of this episode. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm sure glad to see you. How are things going for you?
They're going very well. We are in the midst of getting ready for our book releases for this next year and our summer catalog. And so I was super excited because this is a book that that we're going to be talking about today that I've seen the previous one that we've talked about on this Kolbecast, and I love it. And I've used it, and I've recommended it, and I've used it with my own children in my faith formation classes, and recommended it on Kolbe's religion list.
Good deal. Yes, that's a nice setup for where we're headed. Maggie has contributed to several Kolbecast conversations, both on and off mic, making her very much a friend of the Kolbecast. So thank you, Maggie, for that. And in the very near future, we're going to drop an episode that shines a spotlight on some of the work that you, Maggie, and your team of curriculum developers have been working on with Kolbe's in-house publishing group, some of which you just referred to. So be on the lookout for that. That is slated to come out here in the next couple of episodes. But in the meantime, and just in time for the beginning of Lent 2025, I am delighted to welcome back author-illustrator duo Katie Bogner and Sheri Van Vranken, whom we met in episode 184, as Maggie referred to, when we discussed their book about the seasons of Advent and Christmas. They are back today to tell us about their second joint venture, All About Lent and Holy Week, sharing the seasons of repentance and salvation with children, published by Emmaus Road Publishing, which is affiliated with the St. Paul Center. Hi there, you two.
Hi, Bonnie and Maggie. Thanks so much for having us back on.
Hi. Yes, thank you.
I think I remember you mentioning that this book was in the works when we visited with you last time, and I both marveled at the lead time for that, and also was looking forward to that. And now it's come to be. So, Katie, how have you been since we talked to you, though? And other than this book, how have things been going for you?
Good. I mean, I feel like it was just like a couple months ago that we chatted, and I know that that's not true, but
Yes.
Yeah, school is busy. I'm a middle school religion teacher in a Catholic school, and volunteer quite a bit with my parish. And it just seems like when you're in the midst of all of those things, time goes really fast. So
It's faster all the time, I think. Yes. Sheri, how have you been since then? Catch us up with you a little bit.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Keeping heads above water. We're still building a house and we're getting ever closer, but we're not sure when.
Yeah. Yeah.
And homeschooling our kiddo who's now a high school freshman, which I just cannot believe.
Wow.
But yeah, it's been very busy. And Katie and I, it seems like we've just worked nonstop on both books, truly.
Yeah.
they really flowed from one into the other. There wasn't really a break.
That's one of the things I admire about this book is this
No.
connection that you draw between Advent and Lent. I love that. As this episode is airing, it is almost, not quite, Lent 2025. So, Katie, I'm going to start with you. How do you like to approach the season of Lent with your students and loved ones?
Oh, so I think that Lent can sometimes get a little bit of a bad rep. Like Advent is all, cozy and sparkling lights and getting ready for baby Jesus. Most people look forward to Advent or enjoy the season. But Lent, on the other hand, sometimes kids do not look forward to as much. They find it a little more challenging. But the thing is that as a teacher over the years, I have really, really tried to encourage my students to see Lent as this wonderful opportunity to journey with Jesus in the wilderness. And it's not going to be easy. It's not all, like I said, it's not, fluffy and sparkling lights and everything, but it is going to be so, so worth it. So I really try to move them beyond, thinking about like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to give up chocolate or whatever it might be. But really challenge them to think about, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, and how they can use this as an opportunity to grow closer so that when Easter comes along, they are further on their walk with Christ than they were on Ash Wednesday. And so, one quick thing that I really try, so thinking about kiddos, it can be really, really hard to keep a resolution for 40 days. And so, another thing that I remind them is that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay, say you give something up and whoops, accidentally, or I dove in and I did that thing I said I wasn't going to, or whatever. Like, try again. It's not all over. You don't have to throw in the towel. And another thing is, maybe rather than this like one resolution that will be really challenging to maintain, especially for little ones, is instead to try to do something different every single day. And we talk a little bit about that in the book, that like how beautiful it would be just to look for opportunities to do prayer, fasting, and almsgiving every single day. And even if it's not this one die-hard resolution, to maintain that for the entirety of Lent. And again, how much closer we'll be to our Lord when Holy Week arrives.
That makes so much sense. And it also seems very sustainable after once we get to Easter and beyond, right? Are there any Lenten devotions or practices that you yourself undertake that you are comfortable sharing with us?
Sheri, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, we begin with Ash Wednesday as a family. As long as my husband is in town, he will go wherever he is. But for the past couple of years, we've been blessed to have him home with us. And typically because we live rural now and we're not as close to a parish. It's a good 30, 45-minute drive, depending on where we decide to go. We don't have as easy access to stations as we used to, but we live in wooded area. So we have come to nail the stations to the trees out here, and we'll walk our dogs and pray them together as a family on Friday afternoons, which is kind of fun. It's a very special thing to do here, especially when it's raining and cold. But we don't do just a ton of stuff, because when I try to do that, it sends me off the rails. And like Katie was saying earlier, you fail. This year I did buy a reflection book that's very short for us to do on a daily basis, which I think will be, my kiddo is finally old enough to handle that sort of thing. And we collectively typically do not eat sweets because we are all sugar fiends in this house. So it works well for all of us to kind of just not buy it, not eat it. And, that way, that is a huge sacrifice for us, let's put it that way.
Sure.
Like our desserts around here.
What about you, Katie?
I think that I feel like sometimes I do too much. But so that's always kind of an interesting conundrum, is like, adding in things, taking things out. But one thing I know that I want to do this year is I was trying to use Lent to kind of reset my daily mass attendance. Like, I'm in often, but not always, just because of schedule, and I might be running late in the morning. I live in the country and have a really long commute to get to 7 a.m. mass before work. And so I really try to step up and really, really stick to getting to mass every day. And one of the ways that I motivate myself to do that, of course, besides getting to mass, is making sure that I'm intentionally offering my mass for someone for a specific intention, because it just gives me that extra drive. Like, no, 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 today's mass is for so and so. I've got to get there and pray for them. And I've done that for a couple of years. But one thing I want to do this year is actually sit down before Ash Wednesday and plan out every single day and make sure that I'm hitting all of those people and specific intentions that I've promised to pray for or on my heart, and really, really kind of map out the season, because I think it is going to help me to be more intentional and more driven to meet that Lenten goal, if that makes sense. And then, of course, it's just a great reset to then go into the whole year. It's not like I'm going to stop going to daily mass after Easter, right? But it gives it an intentionality and helps me kind of reset. So that's one specific thing I know I'm going to do this year.
I love that idea of intentionality with everything, just making it, offering, even if it's not, here we don't have mass every single day where I live, but just even thinking in terms of the sacrifices that we do, the giving up the desserts or the extra prayers or the almsgiving, whatever it is that we're going to do on that day. I love the idea of making that intentional and thinking about the person who we're going to give that all up for that day. So that's a great idea. For us over the years, I think I really like the idea of all three. I leaned into that for the first time last year, doing the prayer and the fasting, the almsgiving, and I definitely think we're going to continue because the children actually loved it. It was way more interesting, and I feel like with all these different ways of looking at Lent, that it's really wonderful. Just I think children need a little bit of fresh, reset every year, something to be excited about. So ideas are wonderful.
I think that intentionality is meaningful to them too, like to help them understand a why piece of it. Yeah. All right. Well, let's dig into your new book, All About Lent and Holy Week, sharing the seasons of repentance and salvation with children. Katie, what are some of your standout memories of this process, and how has it been different this time versus your previous books, the one you collaborated with Sheri on before, or you have other published books as well? So what's been different this time, and what stands out?
Sure. Okay. So one thing, like you already alluded to, the last time we chatted, we did kind of drop the hint that there was going to be a Lent book as well. So the cool thing about this project is from the very beginning, we knew that there was going to be an all about Advent and an all about Lent. And of course, there were a lot of decisions to make between when that was a few summers ago until now. The cool thing that I really enjoyed about working on All About Lent was that Sheri and I had like kind of refined the process from All About Advent. We had these spreadsheets that I built, from the very beginning and compared things. And so, whereas the first time was a lot of like, what is this blank page going to become? Like, how much information? How are we going to organize it? Sheri, of course, had a much bigger challenge when it came to that, the style of the book, because she did the beautiful illustrations as well as all of the design work. But this time was kind of fun because we had like the structure and the format, but then we had to figure out how to plug things in. Even though Lent is a longer season, it's a little more complicated to explain in kid-friendly language, but we had the format to fit it in. So it was more like making pieces fit in a puzzle, if that makes sense. The challenge was different. And of course, I just so enjoy and appreciate collaborating with Sheri. I know she's sitting here listening to us, but I can't help but sing the praises of Sheri and her talents and working together with her. So it was really wonderful to be able to where I don't know that there's been many days over the past couple of years that we haven't texted each other or chatted or sent things back and forth. And so the book really is a beautiful collaboration of both of us. It's not like I wrote everything and turned in my manuscript and dusted off my hands and walked away. We really have been working together every step along the way, and that's been my favorite part.
So neat. I love that.
I totally mirror everything Katie said. Yeah, and this one was a lot more fun, I'll be honest, because all of the major decisions, like Katie said, had already been made. So it was more of in embracing the details of how are we going to make the font different from the Advent font, because put crown of thorns in the letters this time versus the stars that we used in Advent and spaced out there for a second. But yeah, we also, it gave us more time to brainstorm the fun parts, like to really visualize it from front to back, because last time it was so different. Like we had an idea, but we had to make it all fit together like a puzzle. This time I could get started earlier on all of the section graphics and images, and then that was a beautiful process in and of itself, because then it just sort of segued naturally into the Lenten journey. And this book was, for me, what stands out the most is that I've never really illustrated landscapes before, and there are quite a few in this book, and I pretty much think of all of them as landscapes. They're all their individual vignettes that walk with Christ along the journey. It's so much fun. We love talking every single day. It was a great thing because whenever you get stuck, it's just a text of, hey, look at this, what do you think? I like this part but not this, and then we'll typically either one or the other of us will solve it in a matter of seconds, which is great.
That is neat.
Make it better.
It shows in the book as well.
Yeah. I was just wondering about your whole process, because the book is that all about Advent. I brought it in to my class of students in faith formation. They're fourth grade, all over the place in terms of abilities and skills, and they loved it. I mean, the pictures invited them in. I had to pass every page around, the book around to let them look at it. But they really, it was really accessible. The reading level was good. They all understood it. And that is something I very rarely see in a book where I feel like it just kind of met this whole group at a level they were interested. Um, Obviously, it's your skill and talent, but I wondered kind of what's your process of going through that and just, testing it and getting it to that level where it's just so perfect for, I've read it to younger students too and older students, and they've all enjoyed it. So I don't very often find a book like this, and I just love to hear a little bit more about your kind of not just the process, the ideas, they're wonderful, but then kind of bringing it, Katie, probably what you do with the words, just bringing it onto the page in such a way that it works for everybody.
Well, that's some pretty high praise, Maggie. I'm gonna tuck that away and hold on to that when I need some encouragement. So I really appreciate that. And that really is wonderful, not just that, sitting down with, your child next to you while you're working on some curriculum at home, but to take it into your parish religious ed setting where, like you said, you've got kids from not only all like academic abilities, but also all different types of backgrounds with the type of catechesis and formation they have in their home as well. So that's really incredible. I think two things came to mind while you were talking about that, besides the fact that I was really excited to hear your feedback. So I have been teaching, I have to do like the quick math. This is my 17th year of teaching, which is really crazy to say that number out loud. And I have taught primarily middle school the whole time. And so like right now I have 150 students. And so when you do the math, even though, so the beautiful thing about that is I get to see them for multiple years in a row. I teach them in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. But overall, we're talking like hundreds and hundreds of kids that I have taught in the classroom, and they're not all the same. They're all unique, unrepeatable, irreplaceable individuals. And so I think that that has really helped push me as an educator and as a content creator to make things that are accessible in multiple ways. Because the truths of our faith are beautiful and timeless, and they should be approachable for all of them. And so that kind of leads me into I am very, very, very passionate about taking what our church teaches and giving it in the fullness of the truth to kids without watering it down, making it seem babyish, only giving them little parts of the truth or whatever it may be, however you want to, phrase that. I really, really, really feel strongly about finding ways to take that and just make it accessible. And that could be bringing the language down to their level. That could be doing it in bite-sized pieces, which are two things that we did in this book all over the place. But to still use like the elevated terms that we have, transubstantiation and, like all of those things, they should know that language, but then let's take it and make it approachable to them. And then couple it in like small chunks of information that are beautifully illustrated and broken up in a way that is graphically pleasing and easy for them to navigate as a reader, whether they be younger readers who are just kind of exploring the book on their own, or whether it's an older child who will eventually kind of read through all of it in multiple sittings, maybe. So I would say that those are two things that are kind of from my background that now, I don't want to say they come naturally because it's still hard work, but that I think because it's so important to me, that comes out in the style in which I write.
That is so lovely. I think those are really key ideas. And I think your point there about not watering down the faith is part of it, is really probably maybe the most important thing, because I haven't taught faith formation for that many years, but I've taught for a long time. And I do see that children of all ages are hungry for the truth, the whole truth. They don't want bits and pieces. So I agree that the bringing the language down and the beautiful pictures that are going along with what they're seeing to kind of invite them in, those are key things. And then giving them the actual doctrine that matters. So yeah, I sort of think of these books in a way too with the illustrations like the stained glass windows of the Middle Ages, where you go in and you learn about the faith from looking at the window, and that was intentional. And when I passed the book around with the students too, so they would ask, what is this? Well, what is that? Oh, it's this, that. There was interest in the pictures that hooked them further on things. So that was really lovely to see. So I'm a huge fan.
We've already laid this groundwork, but I would love to hear you kind of tell us, maybe Sheri, we'll start with you. When you were creating the illustrations and the graphics and everything, did you have settings in mind where not dissimilar to specific intentions? Maybe you did have specific intentions. Did you have Did you have those in mind as you were creating the illustrations and graphics? And did you have any thoughts about how you saw it being used by those who would pick it up?
Yes, much like Advent, except this season being longer, had a lot more intention of making the images more detailed, more, I don't know, rich, but not super colorful, but enough to have kids really get hooked and study them, because Katie's writing is so beautiful. And I mean, the very first page was, I started from the beginning reading the manuscript when I got the final. And that very first page, it clicked, like all of it clicked for me. This is a journey. We're going on this journey, and it's not going to be easy, but there are going to be some fun elements to it. And there are going to be a lot of opportunities to learn, and especially about more complex concepts and tangible objects. I love how you said about the stained glass window approach, because that I had never really thought of it that way, but that's sort of how I approach each of the pages. Like, there has to be a set amount of detail for my brain to to put forth, because it needs to go along with her beautiful words, and it needs to bring it to life. And I think for me as a kid, that's how I learned, was always visual. And whether they're old enough to read or young enough to just be listening, they can still sit and study those pictures. I do feel like I didn't want to make things too somber. When Katie and I talked about this a lot, but we also really wanted it not to be dumbed down. The crucifixion is gory. It's not pretty, because we want kids to see what really happened and not sugarcoat it or make it cartoony, So I think for me, the just that running thread of Christ's love for us, his sacrifice for us, that was was hoping to get across in every page. I don't know how necessarily did it, but I think this one too, being longer season and a lot more information. And at the beginning, it was a bit daunting, because I thought, oh, we're not going to have that much space for pictures. And Katie and I kind of went back and forth, like figuring, and that was the puzzle of this book, was how do we get all of these images that we want in there to fit in there? And I think we succeeded. It took some doing. It was a big game of Tetris. But yeah, it was a fun process. And I hope that the best part for me are the sidebars as well as the running text, because you can read it in so many different ways. You can approach it reading just the story of the book, or you could just go through and read the sidebars, because it either way, it all meshes together so beautifully with the story of our faith.
Yeah, I guess especially since this is kind of an unusual, I don't know, unusual situation or launch for us, because we kind of have the experience and the feedback that we've received from the All About Advent book. And so, of course, because my background is in Catholic education, but I also have spent so much time in parish ministry working with all ages. And of course, I have, 6 nieces and nephews and lots of friends with kids. I'm trying really hard to make sure that this is a resource that can be used in a classroom setting. It can be used in a parish setting. It can be used in a home. And I try to not be biased, but I think we kind of did that. I think that this book can be applied in all of those situations. So for a family, the book might be out in your Lenten book basket or on your coffee table or stuck in the console of your van, and you pull it out and read a little bit at a time. The cool thing about the book is that we've broken it up into, I'm gonna air quotes, I know you can't see me, but chapters that are like 2 or 3 pages long. And so if you're getting ready to go to Mass for Ash Wednesday, and you want to just read like the 2 pages about Ash Wednesday, you can do that ahead of time to kind of prep your kids, or do it when you get home, talk about it afterwards too. So there's these little chunks that you can use, especially since Lent is such a long season, and especially because Holy Week is so rich and filled to the brim with liturgical traditions we often only do once a year. It's nice for that purpose. But then from whether it's a parish catechetical setting or a Catholic school classroom, In the same way, a teacher can pull it out and use those things to go through kind of the overarching themes of Lent and how it's part of the liturgical year. And really, I know I'm kind of circling back to what I just said about kids deserving to have this like elevated language, and that we can teach them the fullness of the truth. I'm sure all of us have been in situations where we are struggling to articulate how to word that in the moment, right? When we're trying to explain something like, why do we give stuff up for Lent? And why do Catholics keep Jesus's body on the crucifix as we hang on our walls? Like, why do we do those things? So overall, the book, when we designed it, of course, it is designed with kids in mind, but it also really is emphasizing the role of the adult in their life, whether it's a parent or grandparent or teacher or catechist. The goal was also to provide them with a resource that will help them to have good conversations with their kids, to help them be the primary catechist in their life, especially talking about parents, and especially to have like the language to discuss with them this beautiful season.
Maggie, will you say more about how you have the various ways you've used the Advent book, and it probably lends itself to the Lenten book as well. You mentioned some when we at the beginning of our conversation.
Yeah, well, sure. I think first of all, as a homeschooling mom, because I also homeschool my children using, Colby's curriculum, but I I have seen myself, first of all, it's my own children. I took the Advent and Christmas book, and we actually went through it like you were in bite-sized chunks over Advent and leading up to Christmas. And it was really nice because I had a young child who was very visual. He liked the pictures. So we would start with him. I actually let him sort of be the driver. We would look through only certain sections. He was at a time, but he would look at a picture and he'd say, "Tell me about this." And it started a conversation. So that's how I used it in my home. And with my own child, that was wonderful because we had so many interesting conversations. He wanted to sit down and read the whole thing at once. He liked it a lot, but I wouldn't let him because I wanted to have that repeated excitement. I was using it kind of like his chocolate candy advent calendar, which was, this is the other part. So feed the body, feed the soul. And that was my view with him. In my faith formation classes, I brought it in over, we had like just two classes during the season, but I brought it in and we actually used certain portions. It gave me ideas, like I did a Jesse tree with them. And I came in with things ready to go so that we could do it a little quicker because we didn't have all the time. But we went through the journey, we read the parts about that, and we did a Jesse tree, and then we did an Advent calendar, and then we just spent time reading. I usually spend about 15 minutes reading about a saint, and for those weeks, we just read other sections through I selected sections to read. So I've used it that way as well. And I anticipate using the Lent book the same way, both with my own child and in my classes. Next year when it's out, I will bring it in, and since I have a sneak peek. I already have a few good ideas that I will bring in this year. I find just the images and the ideas, they're just so good. You guys did such an amazing job with creative ideas, ways to kind of bring it to life. And I just go through it and I use it for resources. It's better than any of the other resources I have at my disposal. So I get the ideas from there. And I think it's because it's not watered down. That's the biggest thing. The students respond to it, and that makes me really happy to see because I want them to be on fire for their faith and love their faith. And I love your idea of seasons. That's the other thing, just focusing on the whole season, not just Advent, but Advent with Christmas, and not just Lent, but Lent with Easter. I just think that's really important. And a lot of people don't do that in books I've seen. It's one or the other, but it's a journey that starts and it has an end that's joyful. That's another really important part is that idea of the whole journey with the destination. And, at the end of it, that made it exciting and kind of complete.
Yeah. Is there more, Katie, you want to say about how families can enter into the season of Lent together and prepare for Easter?
I guess as we've like kind of described the book, it really is a little bit more of the why behind the season and helps explain things, helps give you the language to do that. But maybe you also are looking for some of the what, like what do we do or how do we do this? And so one of the things, like Sheri and I are real big on creating content. Like if you've seen Sheri's website, Catholic Paper Goods, she has hundreds of printables. And then my website is just filled to the brim with like, teaching tools and lesson plans. And so one of the things that was important to us is that we also give you some practical tools as a family or as a classroom. And so there's a whole set. Sheri would have to correct me, but I think it's like over like 20 pages of free printables that we made to go along with the book that match. So for example, we talk about pretzels and how pretzels are, associated with as a Lenten food because they're appropriate for fasting regulations and remind us of a prayer posture. And so we made a really cute little printable pretzel recipe. Like not only can you make the pretzels, but it has the content to explain why they're associated with Lent. Sheri mentioned earlier there are 40 days or 40 ways for 40 days. So here's 40 different things that are very approachable for a child to do during Lent. And so Sheri designed it and made it a cute little printable, and you can stick that on your fridge and work on checking them off where, maybe you can't give up TV for the entire season of Lent, but one of the options on there is like, fast from TV for one day, check it off. Send a surprise card in the mail to someone who needs some encouragement, check it off. Clean out your closet and donate gently used toys to, wherever, check it off. So things like that. So while the book is going to give you the why behind the season and how it fits into the liturgical year, we also made a bunch of practical stuff to help you with the what and the how.
I was perusing some of those printables and thinking, Sheri, wow, I'm thinking about, so you've illustrated the whole book and then you turn around and make a bunch of printables. So say a bit about that and what you have in mind also about putting them to use as people are entering into the season and getting going with Lent.
Well, yeah, we approached Advent in the same way. We knew we wanted to have a lot of free offerings to enhance the experience of the book, and hopefully solidify it in those little minds while they're listening to the book being read. There's so many different things that they can do from these. And they're not just, there are a lot of coloring pages, but each one of them has catechesis involved, descriptions from the book, explanations of one of the best parts for me was the Crotalis, the clacker on Holy Thursday, because you hear it just that one night. And I don't think kids ever even see it, necessarily. Like, why is it making that noise? And what is that? So that was the best part. Like, we have to put that in there because, it's just such a key part of the Triduum. So yeah, they can understand why we do that. And then, the activities themselves, like the fact that you can sit down and actually put hands to work, cutting out there's a stations booklet that you can put together. So Katie wrote a reflection for each one of my illustrations, and that way you can cut them all out and staple them together. And it's a great resource to not only just take with you to stations, but the kids having a chance to put it together. Hopefully that is another way of weaving in each and every station. There are, the foods. I love that food part too, because just in reading the books, the manuscript the first time, and there was a section on Fish Friday, and I knew we had to have a really cool illustration for the fish fry. So we have that. We have a placemat with the fish fry image on it. And that's the staple for me. That's one thing we've always done as a family is go to fish fry night. But all of these things they're just so valuable, I think, to help the kids to really grasp the explanations of all of these things, why we do them.
Maybe Maggie, I'll start with you. Are there other foods that you associate with Lent specifically?
Fish fries are definitely a thing, but fish is so good it almost doesn't seem Lenten. So at least for us, a lot of it is more just the giving up the fasting in between meals, or giving up other foods, trying not to eat meat on Wednesdays as well as Fridays sometimes, just things like that. So it's not been as much about foods. The pretzels sound like a great idea and like something my little guy would love here to
Mm-hmm.
to make. He likes to bake, so if there's something like that, he's usually the one to get excited about it. We've done king cakes before and things like that and talked about the significance. So he definitely would like that, but we haven't done any particular foods, just the normal standard
Yeah.
things everybody does.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have done like the rice bowls like with your kids before, if your parish does like Operation Rice Bowl. There's various different, variations of that. But so I guess like simple meals like rice and beans or trying, I know one of the things that they do with some of like the CRS rice bowls is they also send you with like a calendar with different recipes from around the world. So what are people really eating in some of these third world countries that need our extra support? And so I think trying maybe some of those meals that people are eating around the world that are normal everyday fare for them, but maybe are a little sacrificial for us, in a Western culture. So trying to have, so I, I'm not a big, huge meat eater. And so that's actually not something that I miss. So I try to sacrifice something else. So whether it's having a super simple meal or like we've already talked about like sweets and not fasting between or not eating between meals, things like that. So yeah, I think rice and beans also comes to mind.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Well, after the book came, reading the book, I've never really made hot cross buns, but I'm a little intrigued by those now. I might give that a shot this year. They're very bland, right? If I remember correctly.
They're pretty functional,
I give
right?
that a
Just
go.
like just for the
Yeah,
sustenance. Yeah. No frills. Yes. Yeah.
right.
Okay. Well, on the flip side of that, there are a couple of big feast days that happen during Lent very frequently. The Feast of St. Joseph, husband of Mary, and the Annunciation. And there are other feast days, of course, that fall within that time frame. But how do you like to approach that? And kind of what are your thoughts about striking the balance between observing the festivity, the solemnity of it? It's like Sunday, it's still Lent though. How do you navigate that?
Well, I mean, we follow the reason why we live the liturgical year in our homes is because we're following the rhythm of the liturgical year that the church is living, right? Everything we're doing is ebbing and flowing from the liturgy, from the mass itself. And so, and we feast and we fast together as Catholics. And so if the church says it's a solemnity, then we should treat it like a solemnity. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And so, if a solemnity happens to fall on a Friday, we, typically receive a dispensation and or can eat meat that day. Does that mean we have to? No. But I do think that we shouldn't get too our Lenten practices are super important. Like we are invited to pray and to fast and to give. And we have certain regulations for fasting and abstinence that we should follow those things. And we should be generous with our prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. We shouldn't just be doing the bare minimum. I always love my students who are like, Miss Bogner, I'm going to give up Brussels sprouts for Lent. I'm like, okay, do you like Brussels sprouts? I'm like, no. And I'm like, well, maybe we need to do a little bit of a heart check here about what we're doing and why. But at the same time, I also think that we have to be careful to not make our prayer, fasting, and almsgiving more rigorous than the church is asking of us, especially our voluntary disciplines. And so I'll just say that like every family needs to discern how they would handle that. But in my opinion, I think if the church has said it's a solemnity, we should treat it like a solemnity, even if it's just for that day. And whether that means you have a special dessert that is, oriented to the Annunciation on that day, even though your family maybe doesn't have sweets during Lent, but you have that on that solemnity and really talk about it because what's going to be more memorable to the kids, right? Like that you were, holier than the than the liturgical year, or like that, oh my gosh, wow, the Annunciation is so important that, even though it happened during Lent, like we always had this beautiful white birthday cake or something like that, to celebrate the incarnation. So I think that it's important to make sure that, yeah, of course, we should follow what the church is asking of us when it comes to Lenten disciplines, but we also shouldn't let be such a rule follower in that way that we miss the opportunities to feast and fast together as a community.
I just think it's funny because I did not spend a whole lot of time when my son was younger, living liturgically with food.
Mm-hmm.
But I just have to laugh because last year, inspired by our Advent book, honestly, we made I'm going to butcher this probably. Is it Zapoli? Is that how you say the donuts for on the feast, the Solemnity of Saint Joseph? It's a lot like funnel cake with powdered sugar. We really enjoyed that around here.
Sounds good.
But yeah, and then it stands out as a core memory, and I like that because I think we were also inspired because the year before last, we were actually in Italy on the Solemnity of St. Joseph,
wow.
and we were able to go to Mass at Santa Maria Maggiore. And, it was, so we just wanted to keep riding that high, I think. But, that's a valuable part of that feast within the fast season. So it's a good good thing for the kids, I think, to see that, yes, we still can honor our saints and Blessed Mother with fun stuff.
Right.
I was just
Definitely,
thinking about that too, how, special those days are. I mean, my children all love them because they are these feast days, and they're the only two like that, that they always get. I remember this has stayed with me all my life, and I've told this to my children, and it's been impactful for them as well. But one year, St. Patrick's Day fell on a Friday in Lent, and it happens regularly, but it was a really hard one. And they were going to some event, and we had a dispensation for meat, but it wasn't a solemnity. And so I asked a priest whether it was okay. It just seemed a little funny. It wasn't one of the solemnities. And he said, well, he just looked at me and smiled and said, what would St. Patrick want you to do? And that was it. No meat. We just went and had a party, but in honor of the saint, but we didn't have the meat. But that also brought home how important those feast days are. So, it's been a blessing to have those days. And I agree, we want to celebrate them. But when the church says it's a solemnity, and we've got to celebrate it just like everyone else does. It's a kind of unifying thing, and a beautiful thing to kind of have those days where you get to, enjoy the feasting in the middle of this otherwise difficult, sometimes a challenging season. So
yeah, yeah. Well, so your book all about Lent and Holy Week. Let's talk about Holy Week. There's a beautiful layout that Sheri has done of the progression from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. Talk to me a bit about celebrating the Triduum with children, the 3 days. That is the high point of the church year, of course. Want to celebrate that with them. There are some practical aspects of it that are worth considering. So how do you like to approach that?
So as a teacher, it's always actually kind of hard because we are never together for the Triduum. So I talk about how it is the holiest part of our church year, that everything leads to it and flows from it, but I can't actually like experience it with them. So whether like if you're listening and maybe you're a parish catechist, or we might have some listeners who are teaching in a school or a co-op or something. I think that really educating the kids on like the story of Holy Week, and how day by day, like you alluded, Bonnie, like day by day, we're walking with Jesus in the same order of events and the same timeline that he walked through during that first Holy Week. And so I really take some time as a teacher to make sure that my students know those stories, and we're reading them from the Gospels. We're talking about the rich meaning and symbolism. And I also like to take some time to then show them how, well, here's the story in the Bible and what happened with Jesus. But here's now how we celebrate that in the liturgy, specifically during the Triduum, because of course that liturgy is unlike any other. And there are many things that we do during the Sacred Triduum that we do not do any other time of year. So I try to kind of work in that catechesis and drawing parallels between the first Holy Week and how we celebrate it now in the liturgy. And then aside from that, so that's from the kind of the educator standpoint, then as a family and as parents, I really, really encourage people to consider attending as much of the Sacred Triduum as possible. But I also say that knowing that many of those liturgies can be very late, they can be very long. Many parishes only, well, for the Sacred Triduum specifically, there's only going to be one part of each liturgy. You can't catch it. There's one at 4 and there's one at 7. So sometimes practically family life doesn't lend itself well to that in different seasons, just because of the age of kids and bedtimes and things like that. But I would encourage you, as soon as your children are able, as soon as it works in your family rhythm, to attend as much of the Sacred Triduum as possible. And even if that means that like maybe the little ones stay home and have to go to bed, but the older kids go with mom or dad to Holy Thursday Mass, for example, because there is nothing else that you can replicate in the way, the immersive experience of the Sacred Triduum. It is the height of, all of the smells and bells that we talk about as Catholics, and is so beautiful and rich. So I guess those are kind of two things. One, to kind of like educate and talk through the stories and how it equates now to the modern liturgy, and then to really say yes as soon as possible to attending as much as what your parish offers as possible, because I think that those are core memories and foundational formation that you're giving your children and forming your family culture around. I think it's super important.
That's been one of the better decisions I've made, is to involve our child in every single Triduum. I will say, not been to an entire vigil yet. My husband used to sing in the chant choir, so we would always go in the beginning and then sneak out when it was time for bed. But because it just gave him a chance to see the different, the candles, the smells, like we are saying, smells and bells. But it's still part of the highlight of our year. We love going to mass Thursday and then Friday night. I mean, it's so moving. It's so different, like Katie was saying, unlike anything else we do during the year. And it's made a very strong impact, and I will never regret doing that. Can't encourage that enough.
Yeah.
We've always tried to do everything associated with the Triduum because it's so wonderful. As soon as the kids were old enough, we always been in a parish, in a place where we had earlier Good Friday and Holy Thursday services. So the Holy Thursday was late. Some of them would fall asleep, but it wasn't so late that I couldn't have sleeping children. And we've always done those. The vigil is something we have not yet. They're still now I want them to enjoy the mass and pay attention and stay awake. So we still haven't done the vigil, but it's definitely a goal with the little ones. I used to always love the vigil, and my older children will go sometimes to the vigil mass, but it is so important. And I love the traditions. And this last couple of years, we've actually done living Stations of the Cross, as well as a Good Friday service on Good Friday. And so that's been a wonderful thing that they've started in our parish. And it's really nice just to actually participate and act out. One year, my daughter was Mary. And that was the most moving thing. She said it was kind of crazy just how starting out just acting it out, but acting out every station just kind of brought it a deeper meaning. And she was, I noticed she was in the church afterwards praying for a long time. So I'd even say encouraging things like that, if you have them in your parish, that was a real blessing, just to have those other things that sometimes parishes do around those days. It's been wonderful. But yes, absolutely. Go to the Triduum if you can, the moment you can. It's beautiful, like nothing else.
Absolutely. I agree. And I jumped right to the end of Holy Week. The beginning of Holy Week, you have a lot of wonderful ways to observe from Palm Sunday forward. Like every day, there's something. It's not just, okay, we're just marking time until we get to Holy Thursday. That I love how you lay it out in the book. And Katie, do I remember correctly that you have a Holy Week at home retreat that you've done on your website, that
I
there's something to
do.
do every day?
Yeah. You have a very good memory, Bonnie. So that actually, if I remember correctly, I think that I came out with that during 2020, when of course we had a Holy Week like none other. And so I have a Holy Week journal that has, it really just focuses on the Gospels, because if you read the Gospel from Mass each day of Holy Week, you really get the whole story. And so there's a journal page that has like a little illustration to color, and then it has what the Gospel is for that day, and then it gives some type of like a practical challenge, something you can do that day. So on Palm Sunday, you can sing some songs of praise to the Lord, like pick out some of those hymns and sing them together, or listen to them. And so honestly, the spread you were talking about, that it's one of my favorite spreads in the whole book that Sheri illustrated. So there's a little symbol for each day of Holy Week, and then a path that we're walking. That's actually where that content came from. So obviously some things on the blog have been shined up and reorganized and have found their way into the book in that manner. So the book has that too. So it has like a little symbol for each day, and it tells you the gospel reading, and then gives you a practical challenge that you can kind of do as a family that day. Because like you said, Holy Week as an entirety tells the story. We don't have to wait. It's not like there's nothing from Palm Sunday until Holy Thursday. So yeah, Holy Week is so wonderful. And so I just want to encourage families to enter into it. I love that you mentioned trying to go to Stations of the Cross during the week, Maggie. Some parishes will also have Tenebrae services that week, or other things going on to try. You also can, if those, I know that some parishes, they do Stations of the Cross, they're maybe at 7 p.m. or something like that. Don't be afraid as a family to go in, even if maybe you stay after Mass on Sunday, or you come another time when the church is unlocked, and just walk with your kids and look at the stations up close, whether you have images or statues or whatever the style they may be, and really just take the time to let the kids look at them up close. And maybe you're working on, maybe they can memorize the We Adore You, O Christ prayer, and you say that at each station slowly. And 15 minutes in the church, maybe 10 even with little ones, where they get to kind of quietly and privately pray the stations might have a bigger impact than like trying to like strong arm your family into making it to those stations on Friday night that's during dinner time or whatever it might be. So maybe look for ways like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be like the big kind of programmatic things going on in the parish, but maybe even just making a quiet trip in and spending 5 minutes in prayer or walking the stations of the cross. Or I know that some parishes, Sheri mentioned that they have their stations like nailed on their trees outside on their property. There are some parishes that have outdoor stations of the cross, or you may have a shrine near you, or sometimes cemeteries, Catholic cemeteries even have them scattered throughout. So maybe just kind of think creatively this Lent. And you've got a long time to plan. You've got like, somewhere around 40 some days from when you're listening to this, probably. Like maybe find something, one extra thing that your family can do this Holy Week that's appropriate for the age and stages of your kids.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's so much to talk about all this, and I love visiting with you. We're getting close on time, so I want to be respectful of that of your time. So the Easter season is 50 days of festivity, the longest outside of ordinary time, longer than Lent, longer than the Christmas season. What are your thoughts on maintaining that festivity that whole time?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love emphasizing to my students that like Lent is 40 days. Like we fast for 40 days, but then we feast for 50. We party people. Like we know how to do this.
Yeah.
So a couple of practical things like live out the whole octave of Easter, like make each of those days like so, from Easter Sunday until Divine Mercy Sunday, make something super special about that. Maybe if your family fasted from sweets, like you go whole hog on dessert that week, like whatever it might be. Maybe if you worked on adding silence into your home, maybe that whole week you've got like music playing in the background all the time or whatever it might be. And then again, Easter isn't over in just a day. It's such a big deal that we celebrate it for that whole season. And just to keep this brief, like there are so many beautiful stories after Jesus's resurrection and then the time that he spends with the apostles. So that would be something I think, whether you're an adult or you're a family, to like kind of throughout the Easter season, make sure you're reading those stories in scripture of like the different encounters he has with the apostles and how their hearts are changed during that time. I think that that can kind of help keep, and of course, we're hearing those things at Mass, but taking the time in your own Bible, in your quiet time to read those stories and discuss them with your kids, I think can really keep the tone of Easter and help it to feel different than the rest of the liturgical year.
We do enjoy that octave for sure. We kind of definitely overfeast at that point, but we also really love Divine Mercy Sunday. That's a big one for us. Again, there's so many following that in the weeks between Easter and Pentecost. They're just every week has a beautiful the mass readings, all of the Acts of the Apostles. We tend to have a lot more family discussions about that than we would any other time of year. Because it's such a beautiful time.
Yeah, well, I definitely would say the same thing. Celebrating that week, that whole week after is really important. We always make sure to have something really meaty on the Friday after to emphasize
Yeah.
that we're still on Easter. That's, whatever we'll do. Like even if people don't want meat, it's like, no, let's not have it the day before, the day after. But Friday, we're having meat because this is in that octave. It's important. It's a celebration. But it is just the same thing. We do a lot of having more desserts during that time or sweets. If one of my children gave up soda for the whole of Lent, then it was like you have a soda every day, during that week, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Fun. And of course, that's sacrament season. That's probably deserves a full episode to itself. The celebrating the sacraments, so many of them during that season.
I don't know if I can hold back and just talk about the sacraments for like 2 minutes, Bonnie, but
Right, right.
I do think it is wonderful when, I mean, First Holy Communion almost always falls during that Easter season. And so maybe just to like play up whenever possible with kids, like show the connection between like the resurrection is why we have the sacraments. Like if Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, our faith would be in vain, of course. And so maybe just drawing those connections, whatever time of year they are, but helping kids see the connection between the Paschal mystery and the gift of the sacraments would be my quick answer.
Okay.
yeah, that's a big season. I love that season. Not only confirmations and first communions, but also ordinations.
Yeah, very true.
In that time period, it's just exciting. I don't really have much more to add. It's just such a beautiful time of year.
Indeed, that's very true. I'm glad you mentioned that, Sheri. Okay, so we timed this episode intentionally so that people would have time to get the book before Ash Wednesday. Where can people find it and the related materials?
So the book is available from stpaulcenter.com, so you can find it there. You'll get some like free downloads right away if you order there. It's also on Amazon. I would love for you to support the publisher, but sometimes we also need, convenience and things like that. So it is on Amazon. And then I always like to encourage people to ask for it at your local Catholic bookstore, because even if they maybe don't have it on the shelves, that's kind of how things work. Like if you ask for it, they can order it for you. You might have to wait a couple extra days, but then you're supporting a local Catholic business as well. And then when it comes to some, like I mentioned, some of the freebies will come from the St. Paul Center, but most of them are available on my website, which is looktohimandberadiant.com. And so I try to pace out all of the different printables that we have and actually give like a little explanation and how they can be used. So like I said, there's like over 20 resources that you can grab there, lots and lots of things. And don't be afraid if you're hearing this podcast a little later. A huge portion of the book is focused on Holy Week. So if for some reason you don't think you'll get the book until after Ash Wednesday, there's absolutely no reason. It's not dated, it's not paced, it's not a devotional. You really can use it anytime during this season of Lent and Holy Week, and hopefully for years to come.
Okay, good deal. And to find out more about you, Katie, you mentioned your website, looktohimandberadiant.com. Is that where you send folks to start and then they can find you in other areas on the internet?
Really, that's my primary place. And then about the only social media that I'm active on is Instagram. And so my Instagram handle is my full name. So it's Catherine.Bogner. So I'm not really active anyplace else. So website and Instagram are the two places.
Sheri, what about you? How can folks find out more about your Catholic paper goods store and other good stuff you have going on?
My website is catholicpapergoods.com, and I'm also on Etsy, and the shop name is Catholic Paper Goods. And on Instagram, I am more involved than I am on Facebook, but it's also Catholic Paper Goods, at Catholic Paper Goods. Sorry.
Okay.
And yeah, I've got so many different Lent printables and options in my shop too. A lot of them correspond to the materials that we have, just because they're illustrations that I had done prior to the book that just segued in. So you can find a whole lot of Lent there.
And all other good stuff, kinds of cards for ordinations, as you said, and other, sacraments and so forth. Lots of good stuff.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Okay. Our show notes for this episode will have links to the book and to where to find Katie and Sheri. There will be links to their social media handles as well as I just described. So you can head there to find those, as well as links to related Kolbecast episodes. I'm going to list a few that are related. And of course, they're linked in the show notes. So no need to memorize them. The episode where we met Katie and Sheri, episode 194, as well as episode 192 called Kitchen Doings with two of our Kolbe folks. Episode 194 with Amanda Shepard talking about art history and also Lenten themes. That was at the beginning of Lent 2024 when we visited with her. Episode 198 with Dr. Gilbert Lavoie talking about the Shroud of Turin. And also episode 150 with Kendra Tierney Norton, talking about her family's liturgical living devotions and so forth. So all of those are linked in our show notes. Maggie, I'm sure glad you joined me for this conversation today. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful. It was lovely to meet you, Katie and Sheri, and I look forward to your book.
Thank you so much for having us, ladies. Always a joy to chat.
Yes, thank you.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.